We're going to talk the rookie wide receivers and where we rank them in 2024 redraft. This is not a dynasty focused show today. We will dabble in some dynasty. We, by the way, have dynasty rookie rankings now available on Razzball.com. If you go over to the 2024 dynasty tab, you can check out the rookie rankings done by Jeff. So that's awesome. He'll have an article dropping later this week as well, breaking down why he has those guys ranked for dynasty purposes. And always go check out the dynasty trade chart and Nate's top 200 as well. We have great dynasty content, but today we're going to break down the 2024 redraft rankings of these guys. And we have to start kind of, at the top here. Now, Matt, before we even get into the individual players, is there a player, a rookie wide receiver landing spot / player that you like the most? Maybe it's under the radar that you really, really liked out of all of them?
My favorite, probably based on where I think you can draft him, is Brian Thomas. I think he goes into an excellent situation. He's easily the second best and possibly the best wide receiver on that team. And I don't think you have to pay as much for him as you will for some of the other people. Mind you, in Jacksonville, he's got a quarterback that's going to have to figure it out, or Jacksonville's going to have to go look for Blake Bortles 2.0 if Trevor Lawrence just doesn't ever really get to where he's supposed to be. I saw an interesting parallel the other day that Gardner Minshew's numbers are slightly better career-wise, same amount of starts as Trevor Lawrence. So that should be concerning for just about anybody. Calvin Ridley leaves town, goes to Tennessee, leaves Jacksonville with a big hole at wide receiver. I think Brian Thomas comes in and becomes Jamar Chase light in year one, but they're going to have to be able to run the ball. They're going to have to protect Lawrence, but I think Brian Thomas has the easiest path to wide receiver one on his team without the draft capital that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to require.
So trying to figure out, the one thing I like to look at is if the coaching staff is any good with a rookie, right? Because there's some coaching staffs that are hard asses with rookies. They don't play them right away. And so, kind of looking back at Doug Peterson's history with rookie wide receivers, he doesn't have that many where they spent a lot of draft capital. But the one player that stands out is Jalen Reagor. Now, Jalen Reagor was not good for fantasy football his rookie season, but he was essentially a full-time player before he got hurt. So at least I know there's a precedent that, a coach like Doug Peterson will start a rookie right away and not ease them in. We've seen coaching staffs like Andy Reid, for example. The rookies don't necessarily take off right away. I mean, even Rashid Rice was a second-half receiver for the Chiefs last year. But then there's been plenty of scenarios like Sky Moore, et cetera, where they weren't dominant. You have to essentially go back to Tyreek Hill to find somebody who was really good their rookie season under Andy Reid. But Brian Thomas, I think the other thing when you're looking at vacated targets and trying to understand what role, how many targets are available, now Zay Jones is a quiet loss as well. Zay Jones would have been a prominent wide receiver 4 on this team. Now you have Gabe Davis coming in, replacing essentially that deep threat role. Now, Brian Thomas has a chance to be more of a possession type player too. So I like that from it, because you have the deep threat in Gabe Davis. Like Calvin Ridley last year was kind of a high A-dot kind of guy. Not the greatest route tree in the sense of PPR, but I think Gabe Davis will be their vertical threat. Brian Thomas could be their number 1. And so I think there's a really good chance he could return some value as at least a top 36 receiver, especially with the vacated targets from Calvin Ridley, the vacated targets from Zay Jones. Now, listen, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk is a lot of competition, so that is an issue. But at the same time, this is the same offense. So you can essentially, if Brian Thomas earns the number 1 spot or earns the start in 2 receiver, 3 receiver sets, you can feel pretty confident that he can probably take 85 to 90% of Calvin Ridley's targets from last year, because Gabe Davis is not that guy. He's not going to be that guy. We're not expecting him to be that guy. He fits a certain type of role in this offense. So I think that there is a really good chance. That's why I started moving Brian Thomas up. Where do you have Brian Thomas ranked currently in your rankings, Matt?
I have him 37. No, I don't. I have him lower than that. I have him at 59, but he's going to creep up my list when I remember that Gabe Davis isn't as good as him, and Gabe Davis will come down. There's also some guys in Washington that I have listed are ranked a little bit higher right now. Jacoby Myers in Vegas, JSN in Seattle. Some of those guys are probably going to start to move down. Josh Downs I have above Brian Thomas. But as we get closer, I think Thomas is going to ascend, and some of those other names that are just blah or meh to me are going to start to trickle down.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of just running through some kind of your wide receiver rankings. You have him way down there at 59. I personally think he's going to creep up, even your rankings like you brought up. But like I started already boosting him up. I currently have him today as my wide receiver 34, and I have him in my top 150 at 77th overall. So I'm optimistic that Trevor Lawrence isn't I think he's been underwhelming to say the least. I think that is true. But he's still good. Like he's not I think a lot of people thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be Patrick Mahomes-esque. And so far he's just been kind of an average starter. But to be honest with you, average starter that throws enough will be fine for fantasy football. So I think we're okay there. So I'm not stressed about Brian Thomas. I actually like to take a flyer on him where I can. It's still very early, but I have him. I'll probably have him as a wide receiver 3 heading into this offseason.